Hi everyone, I'm Abigail. This is Claire, and welcome to another Two Kids interview.
Today, we are joined by New York Times bestselling author Booki Vivat.
Ms. Vivat has written the awesome Frazzled trilogy.
And on April 2nd, 2024, we will get Ms. Vivat's next book, Meet Me on Mercer Street. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honestly so honored.
Right now, are you frazzled at all?
Yes. I don't want to give all my cards away, but actually anytime I have to speak in public or record a video or anything like that, I always get really nervous and I get very I talk a lot. I talk very quickly when I'm nervous. So I am frazzled, but very excited frazzled.
You've always been a doodler. Can you tell us how your doodles led you to writing a book?
Yes. Okay. So actually, it's a wild story because I never thought I was a very good artist. I thought I was okay, but never I couldn't draw realistic pictures, and I had a lot of trouble drawing noses because noses are really weird. And so I just started off drawing stick figures because I thought this is something anyone could do. I could do it. And I would draw stick figures to all my friends, and we would draw comics to each other in school. But I never really thought that would become anything. But then, so I kind of gave up the idea of becoming an illustrator or an author or an artist or anything like that. But then in school, we had to keep these planners. I don't know if you need to do that, but our teacher was keep a planner so that you can write down your homework and tests and stuff like that. And so I had these planners, but they were just kind of full of boring to-do lists. So I thought I would make it more fun by doodling in them. And then over the years, the doodles just kind of took over my planners. And so now these are all planners that I've had over the years. And I didn't even realize I was practicing art, but now they look a little bit like this. And so you can see, these are I'm working through it. But this is just basically what I did in my life. And so I'll write down, instead of, I don't have any homework anymore because I'm not in school, but I'll write down things that I ate, what I did, shows I watched, books I read, stuff like that. And it's a fun way to sort of keep doodling and practicing art without all the pressure of having to make art or keep a sketchbook. And so for me, this actually really helped me develop my style and figure out my the tone of what I wanted to say. And these planners actually led to the book coming together because someone saw these planners and they thought you should make a book. And that's sort of how it all began. And now we have 3 books and Frazzled. I really like the planner. It takes a lot of pressure off of it because I have a lot of trouble keeping a sketchbook, because I always think oh no, what am I going to draw? What if it doesn't look good? And I feel like I have to feel inspired to draw, and I never feel inspired. So these planners were actually a good way to force myself to draw something. What did I do today? And sometimes it's just really boring. Here's an example. I feel sometimes it's just this is what I ate today. Oh, I watched the Lockwood and Company show. This is me just eating. I got coffee, so sometimes it doesn't even have to be something really inspiring, but I figured out these planners are a great way to sort of keep yourself drawing.
How much of Abby Woo is you?
That's a really good question. I feel like I get this question a lot, and it's a little bit hard to answer because even though Abby and I are not exactly the same, and I think a lot of the things, there's certain things that didn't really happen to me that happened to Abby, and it's obviously fictional and we don't have the same name, but a lot of the stuff that happens to Abby was inspired by stuff that happened to me. So for example, in the first book, she sort of starts this lunch swap and this underground lunch revolution. And I didn't go that far, but I did like to swap my my snacks with my friends. In the second book, she has an evil pet cat nemesis, and that was inspired by my old roommate's evil pet cat nemesis who would always torture me. So I think a lot of the things are very similar, and anyone who knows me in my real life and reads the book, they know exactly how similar we are. But even though that's true, that may be true, we're not exactly the same person. I think Abby is a little bit bolder than I am. I think she figures things out a little bit quicker than I did when I was in middle school. And so sometimes when I write Abby, I write about things that I wish I could have done or things I wish I could have realized when I was in middle school.
Is Casey a lot like you? And can you tell us a bit about Meet Me in Mercer Street?
Yeah, absolutely. This is like the first time I'm actually talking to people outside about Meet Me on Mercer Street. So it's like an exclusive. So Casey is actually not that similar to me. I think it's funny because when I first started writing this book, this is what it looks like. This is an early copy, but Casey's right there. And I actually wanted to write her very differently for me. I wanted to write her as a girl who was really confident in her art and thought she was the best artist in the world. And that's not me at all. But the more that I wrote this character, the more she became like me. And actually, she ends up not really being like a confident artist, but being sort of aspiring, reluctant artist. Like at the beginning, she just kind of draws for fun because she's like keeping a sketchbook, but she doesn't really want to show anyone. And I think that as the book goes on, Casey sort of comes into her own. So in that way, I think we're a little bit similar, but Casey's a little bit more different than me than Abby, I would say. But I think there's still parts of me in Casey. So I couldn't help it. I guess I just had to like put a little bit of myself into this character as well. Oh, and you asked what Meet Me on Mercer Street is about. Okay. So Meet Me on Mercer Street is, like I said, about an aspiring artist, Casey. And she hangs out in the neighborhood with her best friend, Nisha, a lot. And she just kind of practices her art by drawing whatever's going on around her. But then one year, she goes away for the summer. And when she comes back, Nisha's family business is all boarded up and the adults are really on edge. And Nisha is nowhere to be found. So she starts to use her sketchbook and her skills of observation to figure out what's going on Mercer Street.
There's more representation in books now than there ever has been before. And you and your books are a part of that trend. Is that something important to you?
Yeah, it's definitely important to me. I think that when I was growing up, I definitely didn't see a lot of characters that looked like me and on TV or in books or anything like that. But now I think that there's so much more representation happening. And I do think that's really important because there are certain things that I feel like when I was young, it just would have been nice to see a character and think like, oh, that's me. That's like I look like that. That's like the person that I can identify with really closely. And so I think it is definitely really important just for feeling less alone in the world. And so the fact that I get to be a part of helping that happen is honestly a side benefit of writing books for kids.
Can you tell us where you were and what reaction was when you first found out you were a New York Times bestselling author?
Yeah. Oh, it was honestly wild. So this is a little bit of an insider scoop. So when I first started writing Frazzled, I was actually working at the company that published my book. And so I was doing kind of like night and day double duty Clark Kent sort of. During the day I was working as in publicity for the children's department, and I was helping get the word out about other books, other children's books, and sharing about those books. And then at night I was writing my book. And so I was kind of doing both at the same time for the first two books. And when I found out that my book hit the list, I was actually at work with the people who had helped me write my book, who had helped me get my book out there. So it was such a like surreal experience because it definitely wasn't something that I was expecting. And it's definitely not something that happens to everybody. So I felt really honored, and it was just really special to be able to be with the people that I worked with and the people who had kind of helped make that happen and to be kind of surrounded by them. I remember when my boss, who was also like my publicist, told me, and she like told me, and I honestly couldn't believe it. And I just remember I kind of didn't have a reaction because I was so shocked. Like when you receive news and you can't fully process it in your brain. But then when she hugged me, I think I started like just like crying so much. It was great. It was a really magical moment.
So can you tell us about a time you were doing something and noticed someone or something and you thought, I need to put that in a book?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, there are so many of those moments. I think that it's funny because there's so many moments in the books that are sort of inspired by real life things that happen in real life. And like I had mentioned before, in the second book, the evil cat, that was definitely a product of me just being the victim of this evil cat that I was living with. And actually, I was feeling really stuck and I didn't know what the story was for the second book and I was panicking. But my roommate adopted this like cute kitty who was cute, very, very cute, named Sabi, but he was also a little demon and he had it in for me. He just loved to torture me and play tricks on me all the time. And so the whole time I was trying to figure out what my book was about. And I decided I just need to put this cat in the book. And that actually was the key to unlocking everything. And from then, when I put him in the book and I made him part of the story, the rest of the book just kind of flowed out of me. And so that's like an exact example. So a lot of people like laugh and think that this cat is an exaggeration, but no, that like it's actually based on my real life. That part of the story is real.
What is your process when putting a book together?
Do you decide the end for the middle?
Or do you put it together in order?
Oh, another great question. So I think it depends on each book, to be honest. And it's funny because I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of writers say that every book feels like you've never written a book before. Like every time you try to write a book, it feels like, I don't know how to do this. How do I figure out this story? And I think that's because every book kind of has its own process, even though you can kind of have general structures, like maybe you'll outline a little bit and have an idea of who the characters are, but the actual process of putting it together, it changes by like each book. So I would say that for me, I definitely have an idea of sort of where I want to go with it, but so I have like some kind of outline, but that outline always changes as I kind of move through the book and as I write. And the first book, when I first started writing Frazzled, I never written a book before. And so I was trying to figure it out. But then, so I wrote just text first and thought I would draw in illustrations later. But then when I showed it to my editor, she was like, this is fine, but it's not quite what we were hoping. So then I had to go back and sort of start all over again. And I started then by just drawing and writing at the same time. And so when I would get stuck on the writing, then I would draw instead. And then when I got stuck in the drawing, sometimes I would write. And by doing the two together and trying to kind of piecing it together, that kind of helped me figure out the whole book. So now I would say for the most part, most of my books are kind of in that same way. Like I have some general structure and some kind of outline, but it's very loose. And then I kind of start to move my way through the book and write and draw kind of simultaneously and piece together where I want things to go. It makes it kind of fun and dynamic, but also a little bit confusing.
We've interviewed a number of authors who have had books banned.
Which means that many kids won't have access to the same books we do and possibly not see themselves represented in books.
Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting that there's such a spike in book bans right now because it feels like in a time when we have so much access to information, like the internet and like so many libraries, and there's so much more representation happening, and so many people who never had voices before are finally having a chance to say who they are, to speak their truth, and to get their stories out there. And I think that makes us more empathetic people, to be able to not only tell those stories, but to sort of receive them and to be part of them as well. So I think that to see that there's like places in this country where that's being stifled and where people don't have access to those stories, it's honestly really, really sad and a little bit disheartening, just because I think that we could become an even more empathetic society and even more inclusive society if we just listen to each other and sort of have dialogue around just our stories and our lives and our narratives. So I think the good news is that I think there's a lot of people who recognize how important that is. And there's a lot of people who are fighting to make sure that we can have access to those stories. So hopefully we'll just all continue fighting against the book bans and become a more empathetic and well-rounded society.
Agreed. What writer has had the most influence on you?
Oh, that's such a hard question to answer because there's like a lot of different writers who I think have influenced me. Um, you know what book I always kind of think about and refer to for all of my books, I think is Louise Fitzhugh and the who wrote Harriet the Spy. I think that book in particular, I always think about that book as a sort of blueprint for the kinds of books that I want to talk about that are both funny, but that touch on kind of difficult topics and that also have characters who aren't perfect and who make mistakes and who are a little messy because that feels really real. And so I think that book in particular is really has like just had such an impact on who I am as like a writer and the kind of books that like I want to create and put out in the world. I think also a book that I personally love and an author and illustrator that I really love is a picture book illustrator by the name of Kevin Henkes. So Kevin Henkes is he does the like chrysanthemum. He did a book called Chrysanthemum, and he does like the Lily's Purple Purse, and he's just a great illustrator, and I loved him since I was growing up. And that book, particularly Chrysanthemum, was really important to me because it's all about embracing who you are and finding the things that make you special, specifically about your name. And I think for me, when I was a kid, I really hated my name, and it was like so unusual, and people would make fun of it. And I think that I wanted to change my name really badly when I was young. And my mom gave me this book to read. And so when she gave me the book to read, it's all about embracing your name and what makes you special. And so after reading that book, it felt like I realized that my name made me special. And it was sort of like this light bulb moment for me. So like the fact that a book like that can have so much impact on me and on, I'm sure, so many other people, I think that's kind of also sort of a blueprint for how I want to move through the world as an author and illustrator. Yeah, so he is definitely a huge influence and inspiration to me.
Those books were really big for us in kindergarten to third grade.
Oh yeah, they're great. They're really great, especially for kids, like young kids growing up.
What advice do you have for young writers?
Good question. So the advice that I think has been most helpful to me is this idea of not dismissing your creative work. I think we talked about it a little bit before about how when I was doing my planners, I felt like I feel like when I was young, I wasn't a good like illustrator and I was an okay writer. And I think that when I was younger, and sometimes even now, I kind of dismiss my work a little bit, like, oh, it's just stick figures. I'm just doodling. It doesn't mean anything. It's not art, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I'm trying really hard not to do that because I think that all creative work is work. And I think there is a lot of effort that gets put into the work that you do. And it can, even if it doesn't match your expectations of what you want to create, or even if you don't think it's very good and no one else thinks it's very good, I think that there's still a lot of value in making the thing and in putting effort and time and putting like your heart into whatever you're making. And so rather than seeing it as like a failure or seeing it as something that isn't worthwhile or worthy of sharing with people, I think I'm personally trying to figure out how to sort of accept that the work that I do is important and that it's all kind of part of the process of getting better and figuring out like your voice as an author or as an illustrator.
Now that Meet Me on Mercer Street is coming out in spring, does that mean you're done with Abby Wu's story, or will it get to see a Frazzled 4?
I think I am done with Abby Wu's story. I think now she's kind of out in the world and off to like sort of live in everyone's head. And now I'm just trying to figure out what other stories I have to tell.
Wait, what if you made a Frazzled book, but for a supporting character?
Ooh, now that is an interesting idea. Maybe. I'll think about it. That does sound fun though.
Can you tell us about a project you are working on now?
Ooh. Oh, I don't know if I can talk. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about anything yet. What am I working on now? I'm still trying to figure out what I'm working on. It's still in a really early process. I think that it's interesting because I have a lot of ideas swirling around in my head, and I think a lot of them are really personal. And so the next book that I'm thinking of writing, I think will be quite personal and hopefully still funny. But I'm trying to figure out how personal to be and how much of myself to put into the book and balance that with telling the story. So that's such a vague cop-out answer, but yeah, trying to figure out the balance of telling a story that feels really personal, but still is fun for the reader. Very vague.
Zoe and middle grade book?
Yeah, I think I personally love writing for middle grade. I think it's a really interesting age. I think it was the first age when I started to sort of understand a little bit more about the world around me, and I started to sort of realize that things were more complicated than I thought they were when I was in like elementary school or younger, in like kindergarten. And so I think that because of that, it's a really interesting age to write for. I think people are still trying to figure out who they are, and that makes things interesting for me as an author, but also for readers, I think.
Finally, it's time for Turbo 10.
10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Number 1. What is your favorite phrase?
I'm frazzled.
Number 2. What is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
Ooh, space.
Number 3. What is your go-to snack food?
Pastries.
Number 4. What was your favorite book growing up?
Carrot Spy.
Number 5. If you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Ooh, Italy. I want pasta.
Number 6. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Obviously to fly. Then I would fly to Italy and get pasta.
That's great.
Number 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Oh, I really love Hey Arnold. That might be really niche, but I love Hey Arnold. So good.
Number 8. What is your favorite rainy day activity?
Ooh, just like a movie with friends, but in like a pillow fort type of thing.
No. Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be? No rules, even a cartoon character.
Oh, that's so hard. Oh my gosh, that's such a stumper. I was really obsessed with Sailor Moon as a kid as well. So maybe I'll go kid thing. So Sailor Moon, I would love to have Sailor Moon. I really loved this character from another book called Amelia's Notebook. Would love to meet Amelia. And maybe like Merlin or something, like, the like wizard, because just that would be like fun. He could like give us unlimited food. I don't know. That would be a good dinner guest.
Number 10. What's your best piece of advice you were ever given?
Don't discredit your creative work.
You were awesome. Thank you for doing that.
And thank you so much for spending your time with us.
We can't wait to read your future books.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.